Hello everyone, back again with movie and tune recap. Today, I'm going to explain an American supernatural horror film from 2013, titled Nothing Left to Fear. Spoilers ahead, so watch out and take care. The movie opens with a family of 5, Pastor Dan Bramford, his wife Wendy, their son Christopher, and their daughters Rebecca and Mary, moving from Maryland to the small town of Stull, Kansas, where Dan is set to take up a new position as pastor. While traveling, the family loses their way and stops at a farmhouse so Dan can ask for directions. Dan and Christopher approach the house while Wendy and the girls wait in the car, and unbeknownst to them, someone is watching from a distance. Dan finds the house empty until he is startled by a strange farmer named Mason, the property's owner. After learning that Dan is the new pastor, Mason offers to guide the family to their new home. While at the farm, Rebecca and Mary notice a young man slaughtering sheep and collecting their blood, which unsettles them. Mason then leads the Bramfords to their new house, where they discover that the moving company was dismissed by the town's current pastor, Pastor Kingsman. Kingsman and several townspeople are instead carrying the boxes inside themselves. The family is impressed by the size of the house, and the children eagerly explore to choose their rooms. Rebecca decides on hers, but when she looks out the window, she sees a man staring back at her. After Mary briefly distracts her, Rebecca looks again and finds the man has gone. Later, as Dan and Wendy unpack, they find a cake on the kitchen counter. Kingsman enters and explains that it was baked by their neighbor, Mrs. Gordon, as a welcome gift. He then reminds Dan to attend church the next day to officially take over his pastoral duties and mentions that he himself will soon be retiring. That night, while Dan is preparing his sermon in the living room, Wendy joins him. They chat for a while before sharing a kiss, unaware that someone is watching them from outside. Later, the couple gathers their children, and Dan thanks them for their support in moving into the new house, and as the family begins to pray, a man and a woman are seen observing them from the yard. That night during a thunderstorm, Rebecca wakes up to close her window. To her horror, she sees the townspeople gathered on the lawn outside, and a woman suddenly appears in her room, transforming into a wide-mouthed ghost. Rebecca screams, only to wake up and realize it was a nightmare. The next morning, the family attends their new church where Dan will serve as pastor. The congregation sings hymns before Pastor Kingsman takes the podium. During his speech, Rebecca notices the young man she saw earlier at Mason's farm quietly walking out of the church. After finishing his sermon and announcing his retirement, Kingsman introduces Dan to the congregation as their new pastor. Following the service, the Bramfords are warmly welcomed by the townspeople, and Rebecca meets the young man from earlier, who introduces himself as Noah. They have a brief conversation before Noah tells her he'll see her again and promises to show her around town. Back at home, Mary, who is feeling hungry, decides to cut a slice of Mrs. Gordon's cake. However, Rebecca tells her not to, explaining that Wendy have saved it for their first family dinner in their new home. Ignoring her sister's advice, Mary eats a slice of the cake and enjoys it, until she suddenly begins to choke and cough up blood. To their horror, Mary pulls a large animal tooth from her mouth, revealing it had been baked inside the cake. Moments later, there is a knock at the door. It's Noah, who has come to take Rebecca out. Rebecca explains what happened to Mary, and when Noah offers to dispose of the cake, he secretly pockets the tooth instead of throwing it away. After Mary insists she's feeling better, Noah and Rebecca leave for a walk around town. As Noah shows Rebecca different places, the townspeople begin staring at him strangely, making him uneasy. Their outing is cut short when Mason appears, telling Noah that Pastor Kingsman wants to see him. When Noah returns home, where he lives with Kingsman, the pastor reminds him of his duty, saying he must do what needs to be done because it is God's will. Realizing Noah has developed feelings for Rebecca, Kingsman warns him not to get too close to the Bramfords and stresses the importance of obedience. Noah then shows him the animal tooth, explaining that Mary found it, before walking away. After Noah leaves, Kingsman examines the tooth, and removing his shirt, strange markings are seen covering his body. He retrieves a box filled with similar objects and carefully places the new tooth inside. Later that evening, when Rebecca returns home, she learns that Mary isn't feeling well and rushes to her room. The sisters talk, and Rebecca tells Mary about her time with Noah and how Mason interrupted them. She also mentions where Noah lives. That night, Rebecca has another nightmare. She finds herself sitting in a field as a group of sheep approaches her. When she touches one, she notices black goo on her hands, and soon realizes the substance covers her entire body. Suddenly, she is surrounded by the sheep, all of them coated in the same black goo, and before they can attack, Rebecca wakes up in shock. The next day, Wendy and her family prepare food for the upcoming summer festival, which is set to begin in a few days. Dan, Christopher, Rebecca, and Mary, who seems to be feeling better, go into town to do some sightseeing. The streets are busy with festival preparations, and Rebecca notices Mason speaking with Kingsman. Mary tries to talk to a boy, but he refuses to respond, and she then notices a strange mark on his arm. Meanwhile, Rebecca runs into Noah, and the two decide to spend time together. They go on a date at the observation platform of the fire lookout tower in the forest surrounding the town. There, they chat and Rebecca notices a scar on Noah's hand, which he tries to hide. When asked if Kingsman is his father, Noah tells Rebecca that Kingsman took him in after his parents died. The two begin to kiss, but their moment is interrupted when Rebecca spots a man watching them from the trees below. When Noah returns home, Kingsman angrily confronts him about spending time with Rebecca. He tells Noah that he cannot stop what is coming, calling it God's will. Noah insists he wants to save the family, but Kingsman coldly tells him to do his part, before walking away. The next day, Dan and his family attend the festival, where Rebecca and Mary meet up with Noah. While the sisters enjoy the festivities, Noah notices Kingsman speaking to a woman, who discreetly signals him, and he then suggests they get lemonade from a nearby stall. Rebecca notices a scar on the woman serving the drinks and recognizes her as the creature from her dream. The woman drugs the glass that is served to Mary, and unaware of this, Mary drinks the lemonade and quickly becomes violently ill. Rebecca offers to take her to their parents, but Mary insists she can find them herself so Rebecca can stay with Noah. Unable to find them, Mary tries to walk home alone, but she collapses in Mason's arms, who takes her away. Mary awakens tied to a post in the middle of a pit filled with water, surrounded by the townspeople. Wearing a ceremonial clawed finger attached with the animal tooth, Pastor Kingsman slashes his wrist and lets his blood drip into the water. Terrified, Mary pleads for them to let her go, but her cries are ignored, and Kingsman tells her that she has been chosen according to God's will. It is revealed that the tooth Mary found in the cake was part of a ritualistic lottery. Whoever bites into it first is marked as the chosen one. After Kingsman recites a series of ritualistic words, the water begins to churn, and the ground splits open as the gate of hell is revealed. Dark tendrils emerge from the pit and wrap around Mary, pulling her in and consuming her completely. Later, Kingsman brings Mary back to the festival, appearing calm, as though nothing has happened, and the townspeople seem to already know what took place. Kingsman takes Mary to her parents, explaining that she fell ill, and worried, Wendy tells Christopher to find Rebecca. Meanwhile, Noah, who is deeply troubled by what he just happened to Mary, tries to confess everything to Rebecca but is interrupted by Christopher, who informs her that Mary has fallen sick again. The family leaves the carnival and hurries home with Mary. At home, Wendy helps the weak and dazed Mary into her room while Dan receives a phone call from Kingsman, asking him to come to the church. Wendy urges him not to go, worried about Mary's condition, but Dan insists that Kingsman said it was important and leaves. When Dan arrives at the church, Kingsman tells him he needed to get him away from the house, leaving Dan confused. Kingsman secretly soaks a rag in ether, apologizes for what must happen to the Harmon family, and then knocks Dan unconscious with the rag. Meanwhile, dark tendrils begin to take over Mary, and as a rat runs by, she grabs it and eats it, and at the same time, the townspeople paint X's on their front doors using sheep's blood. At the Harmon home, Rebecca goes to check on Mary and finds her shaking on the ground, gradually becoming possessed. Rebecca calls for Wendy, and together they rush Mary to the bathroom, where she vomits a black substance, terrifying her family. Christopher is told to call 911, but he discovered the phone is not working. After helping Mary back to her room, Wendy sends the other two children to find their father, unaware that Mary is now fully possessed. As they hurry to the church, Rebecca and Wendy notice the X marks on each of the townspeople's doors, which leaves them puzzled. When they arrive at the church, they find the doors locked until Noah shows up and manages to open them. Inside, they discover Dan lying unconscious on the church floor. They help him up and begin to drive home. Meanwhile, Wendy goes to check on Mary but finds her sitting in the corner, with dark tendrils spreading wherever she touches. The possessed Mary attacks Wendy, causing her to fall down the stairs, and then this happens. Meanwhile, on their way, they notice that every house has a mark on its door, an X made from blood. Frightened, Rebecca repeatedly questions Noah about the mark, but he refuses to answer. When they arrive at the house, Dan and Rebecca attempt to go inside to get Wendy and Mary. However, Noah grabs Rebecca, telling her to stay outside and insisting there's nothing she can do to help them. Dan proceeds inside, and to his horror, finds Wendy dead and crumbling away on the couch. He stumbles back in shock and sees Mary crawling toward him from the stairway. Terrified, he runs outside, screaming at Rebecca and Noah to start the car and drive away. They do so, but Dan stays behind to try to save Mary, who follows him into the front yard, only for him to meet the same fate as Wendy.
Stop the fucking car now!
Rebecca makes Noah stop the car and demands an explanation. Noah finally tells her that the town guards a doorway to evil, and the only way to close it is to sacrifice the chosen family, which currently is the Bramfords. He reveals that his own family once faced the same fate and that Pastor Kingsman took him in after they were all killed. Meanwhile, Christopher sees Mary approaching from behind the car. Panicked, he runs out and bangs on the doors of nearby houses, begging for help. Noah forces Rebecca back into the car and drives off, leaving Christopher behind. Christopher continues pounding on different doors, pleading for someone to help him, but no one responds. He finally finds a house and manages to get inside, just as Mary grabs his leg, infecting him. Desperate, he asks the family inside why they won't help, but they remain silent. Despite his pleas, the terrified father drags him back outside, but before Mary can reach him, Noah suddenly drives up and runs her over. At that exact moment, Pastor Kingsman feels the impact, coughing up blood. Rebecca manages to rescue Christopher, but noticing that his infection is worsening, Noah parks the car in the middle of the street and decides to leave, begging Rebecca to drive away if they see Mary. Moments later, dark tendrils begin to spread across the street, and the car loses power just as Mary catches up to them. Noah returns and holds Rebecca back as Mary kills Christopher, and horrified, Rebecca and Noah flee together. Noah tells her he knows a place where they can hide, but instead, he leads her to an assembly of townspeople gathered under Pastor Kingsman's command. Pastor Kingsman informs Rebecca that the gateway to hell must be closed, and the only way to do so is by using her blood, and suddenly, the possessed Mary appears at the gathering. While Rebecca is distracted, Noah cuts her wrist and uses her blood to destroy the devil, killing Mary in the process and sealing the gateway. As Rebecca falls unconscious, the townspeople gather around her as a radiant light begins to shine from the center of the ritual circle. Some time later, another family moves into the town. They stop at Mason's farm to ask for directions, and their young son catches Rebecca's attention, having taken Noah's place by slaughtering a sheep before walking away. Okay guys, that's all the recap about Nothing Left to Fear from 2013. Thanks for watching, see you again in the next video.